Boy defends elderly couple who were humiliated in restaurant. The next day, a millionaire sent to pick him up at home, but something was wrong. Before starting the video, say what time you are watching this video and where from. Noah Bennett was a boy unlike most his age. At just 16, his eyes carried a wisdom beyond his years, a quiet reflection of the challenges he had endured growing up in a modest home. His mother, a nurse, worked tirelessly to make ends meet, and his father had passed away when Noah was just a toddler. Yet, rather than becoming embittered, Noah grew up with an appreciation for the small acts of kindness that illuminated his family's darker days. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind that painted the streets with hues of amber and gold. The main avenue of their bustling town was alive with activity. Shops displayed their best seasonal decorations, and the aroma of fresh pastries mingled with the laughter of children. Despite the chill, the sunlight warmed the cobblestones, creating a perfect balance of brisk and bright. Noah weaved through the crowd, carrying a small backpack and a sense of purpose. Today was special. It was his birthday, and his best friend Chloe had planned a surprise. They were supposed to meet at the park later, where she had hinted at something unforgettable. But for now, Noah decided to grab a quick coffee from a quaint cafe he frequented. As he approached the cafe, something unusual caught his eye. Across the street, a modest family-run restaurant was the center of an unsettling scene. Inside, an elderly couple sat at a corner table, their hands intertwined as they quietly bore the brunt of a man's harsh words. The man, who appeared to be the owner, gesticulated wildly, his face red with anger. The sight made Noah stop in his tracks. The couple's expressions, a mixture of embarrassment and helplessness, struck a chord deep within him. This wasn't just a casual dispute over a bill. It was something much more profound. A flicker of resolve lit up in Noah's heart. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just walk away. Noah took a deep breath and crossed the street, heading straight into the storm brewing inside the restaurant. The moment Noah stepped through the restaurant's door, he could feel the tension hanging thick in the air. The elderly couple, Margaret and George, sat in silence, their cheeks flushed with embarrassment. George's hand rested on Margaret's as if trying to reassure her, but his own fingers trembled. The restaurant owner, a stout man with a name tag that read Russell, towered over them, his voice sharp and demeaning. "Do you think you can just sit here and waste my time without paying? This isn't a charity," Russell barked, slamming a hand on their table. A few diners turned their heads, some whispering while others pretended not to notice. The elderly couple avoided everyone's gaze, shrinking into their chairs. Noah's stomach churned. The sheer cruelty of the scene was unbearable. He had been raised to respect his elders, to honor the wisdom they carried and the sacrifices they had made. His mother often reminded him, "Kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything." Russell continued his tirade, pointing to their nearly empty plates. "You ordered the most expensive items on the menu. Now you say you can't pay? Unbelievable. Get out of my restaurant and don't come back." That was it. Noah couldn't stand by any longer. He strode forward, his voice steady but firm. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" Russell turned, his eyes narrowing at the young intruder. "This is none of your business, kid. Stay out of it." "It is my business," Noah replied, his voice unwavering. "No one deserves to be treated like this." Margaret looked up at him with watery eyes, her voice quivering as she whispered, "We're sorry, young man. We didn't mean to cause trouble. We just—" She paused, swallowing hard. "We didn't realize we'd forgotten our wallet until after we ordered." Russell scoffed. "Sob stories don't pay the bills." Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside was the $100 bill his mother had given him for his birthday, money he had planned to use for his day with Chloe. Without hesitation, he handed it to Russell. "This should cover their bill and tip. Now let them finish their meal in peace." The room fell silent, stunned by the teenager's boldness. Russell stared at the crisp $100 bill in Noah's hand, his expression shifting from shock to grudging acceptance. With a huff, he snatched the money and stomped away, muttering under his breath, The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a murmur of whispers from the other diners. Margaret and George looked up at Noah with gratitude etched deeply into their faces. George cleared his throat and tried to speak, but emotion choked his words. Margaret reached out, her delicate hand trembling as she grasped Noah's. "Young man," she began, her voice soft but firm, "you didn't have to do that. We would have figured something out." Noah smiled, his eyes kind and reassuring. "Maybe, but no one should have to go through what you just did. It wasn't right, and I couldn't just stand there and watch." George finally found his voice, his tone filled with earnestness. "You're a good lad. The world needs more people like you. What's your name?" "Noah," he replied simply. Margaret's lips curved into a warm smile. "Noah, you're a blessing. You didn't just pay for our meal. You reminded us that there's still goodness in the world." The exchange didn't go unnoticed. A waitress, who had been watching the entire incident from the sidelines, approached the table with a soft smile. "That was a kind thing you did," she said to Noah. "It's rare to see someone stand up for others like that." Noah shrugged modestly. It just felt like the right thing to do. As the couple finished their meal, Noah stayed to chat with them. He learned that Margaret and George had been married for over 50 years. They'd seen their fair share of hardships, especially in recent times, with Margaret's health issues draining their savings. Despite their struggles, they radiated a quiet dignity that inspired Noah. When it was time for them to leave, Margaret handed Noah a small envelope. "We don't have much to offer, but please accept this as a token of our gratitude." Noah opened it later to find a handwritten note that read, "Kindness is a circle. It always comes back." After leaving the restaurant, Noah couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. He had done the right thing, no doubt about it, but the lingering thought of what he had given up gnawed at him. The $100 bill in his wallet was more than just money. It represented the freedom to enjoy his birthday with Chloe, who had been excited about their plans for weeks. Noah sighed as he approached the park where they had agreed to meet. Chloe was already there, sitting on a bench under the sprawling oak tree that marked their usual spot. Her face lit up when she saw him, but her excitement quickly dimmed when she noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern flickering in her eyes. Noah hesitated, debating how much to share. Finally, he decided on honesty. I had to use the birthday money. I couldn't bring myself to keep it after what I saw." He explained everything, the elderly couple, the cruel restaurant owner, and his decision to step in. As he recounted the story, he watched Chloe's face shift from curiosity to disappointment. "You gave away all your birthday money?" she asked, her tone sharper than he expected. "Yeah," Noah admitted. "I couldn't just walk away. They needed help." Chloe frowned. "But we had plans, Noah. I worked hard to organize something special for you, and now what? It's like you don't care about what I wanted to do for you." "It's not that I don't care," Noah said earnestly. "I just couldn't let them be humiliated like that." "Wouldn't you have done the same?" Chloe looked away, biting her lip. "I don't know. Maybe. But this was supposed to be our day. You made a choice that affected both of us, and you didn't even think to ask how I'd feel." Her words stung, and Noah found himself at a loss. He had acted on instinct, driven by compassion, but he hadn't considered the ripple effects. Still, he couldn't bring himself to regret his actions. "I'm sorry, Chloe," he said quietly, "but I'd do it again if I had to." Chloe didn't respond. She simply stood, brushed off her skirt, and walked away. Noah sat on the bench long after Chloe left, her words replaying in his mind. The day that had begun with such promise now felt heavy with uncertainty. He knew he had done the right thing for Margaret and George, but the fallout with Chloe left him questioning whether he had unintentionally hurt someone he cared about. When he returned home that evening, his mother immediately noticed his subdued demeanor. "Hey, birthday boy," she greeted him with a warm hug. "How was your day?" "It was eventful," Noah replied, trying to muster a smile. His mother raised an eyebrow. "Eventful how?" He recounted the day's events, from the confrontation at the restaurant to Chloe walking away. As he spoke, his mother listened intently, her expression a blend of pride and concern. "You did something brave today," she said when he finished. Something that not everyone would have the courage to do. But I can see why Chloe might feel upset. She planned this day for you, and maybe she just needed to feel like she mattered. Too. Noah nodded, though his heart still felt heavy. I thought she'd understand. Not everyone will, his mother said gently. That doesn't mean you were wrong, but it's a reminder that every choice we make affects the people around us. What's important is learning from it. The words stayed with Noah as he went to bed that night. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts circling around the idea of sacrifice. Was it possible to be both selfless and considerate? He had acted out of compassion, yet it had cost him something valuable, perhaps even his relationship with Chloe. The next day at school, the tension between them was palpable. Chloe avoided him in the halls, and when they finally spoke during lunch, the conversation was clipped and awkward. I just need some space, she said, her tone distant. Noah nodded, respecting her wishes, but feeling a pang of sadness. His actions had set off a chain reaction he hadn't anticipated, and now he was left to navigate the consequences alone. For the first time, he wondered if kindness was always worth the cost. That evening, Noah retreated to his room, seeking solace in the quiet. He pulled out the envelope Margaret had given him, reading the note inside once more. Kindness is a circle. It always comes back. The words resonated, yet they also felt like a challenge. Was this really true? He had acted with kindness, but the fallout with Chloe and the lingering weight of his choices made him question whether it had been worth it. He thought back to Margaret and George. Their gratitude had been genuine, their smiles filled with warmth. In that moment, he had felt like he was making a difference, even in a small way. It reminded him of his father, a man who had been known for his quiet acts of generosity before his untimely death. Noah pulled out an old photo of his dad, a candid shot of him handing a sandwich to a homeless man. His mother had always said, "Your father believed in helping others, no matter what." He used to say, "If you can make someone's day a little better, why wouldn't you?" That memory strengthened Noah's resolve. He realized that his kindness wasn't about immediate rewards or recognition. It was about doing what was right, even when it was hard. Chloe's reaction hurt, but it didn't invalidate the choice he had made. The next day, Noah decided to reach out to Margaret and George. He visited the small address they had written on the back of their note. It was a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town, its exterior weathered but welcoming. When George opened the door and saw Noah standing there, his face lit up with surprise.
"Noah."
What a pleasant surprise. "Come in, come in." Margaret was seated in a cozy armchair by the window, knitting something intricate. She looked up with a smile that could warm any heart. "Noah, dear, what brings you here?"
I wanted to check in on you both," he said.
"And to thank you for your note."
"It really meant a lot."
George clapped a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Kindness is rare these days, son. You gave us more than just a meal. You gave us hope." Noah left their apartment with a lighter heart, their words a balm to his doubts. He had made the right choice, even if the road ahead remained uncertain. As the weeks passed, Noah found himself drawn to Margaret and George's quiet resilience. He began visiting them regularly, often bringing small tokens like baked goods or flowers, though they insisted he didn't need to bring anything. Their home became a sanctuary for Noah, a place where he could let his guard down and soak in their wisdom. One chilly Saturday morning, Noah arrived to find George fixing a creaky cabinet while Margaret hummed a tune in the kitchen. "Noah, you're just in time," George called out, waving him in. "I could use an extra pair of hands." Noah chuckled, rolling up his sleeves. "I think I can manage that." As they worked, George opened up about the struggles they had been facing. Their retirement savings had dwindled due to Margaret's medical bills, and they had been forced to sell their home. The meal at the restaurant had been a rare splurge, a celebration of their anniversary, a decision they hadn't realized would lead to such humiliation. "I hated not being able to pay," George admitted, his voice heavy. But seeing Margaret smile, even for a little while, made it worth the risk. Noah listened intently, moved by their determination to find joy despite their hardships. When they finished the cabinet, Margaret called them to the kitchen, where she had prepared a simple but hearty lunch. As they ate, Noah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for the couple. "You two have been through so much," he said. "And yet, you're still so kind and hopeful. How do you do it?" Margaret smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Hope isn't something you find, dear. It's something you choose. And kindness? Well, it's the one thing we can always control, no matter how hard life gets." George nodded. "People like you, Noah. You remind us why it's worth staying hopeful. You're the kind of person who makes the world better, one small act at a time." Their words stayed with Noah long after he left that day. He realized that the bond they had formed wasn't just about the past. It was shaping his future in ways he hadn't yet begun to understand. A week later, Noah was surprised to find a sleek black car parked outside his house. The driver, a sharply dressed man, stepped out and approached him as he was leaving for school. "Mr. Bennett," the man asked, his tone polite but firm. "Yes?" Noah replied, confused. "I'm here on behalf of Margaret and George," the man explained. "They've asked me to bring you to their residence. They said it was urgent." Noah's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't imagine what had happened but quickly agreed, climbing into the car. The drive was quiet and contemplative, and instead of heading toward the modest apartment complex he was familiar with, the car veered toward a more affluent part of town. Noah stared out the window as the buildings grew larger, their facades more ornate. When they arrived, the car pulled into the driveway of a grand estate. The house was breathtaking, with ivy-covered walls and sprawling gardens. Noah stepped out, his jaw nearly dropping. "Are you sure this is the right place?" The driver smiled knowingly. "Positive. They're expecting you." The front door opened, and Margaret and George greeted him warmly. Margaret, draped in an elegant shawl, beamed at his astonishment. "Welcome, Noah." Noah couldn't hide his confusion. "I don't understand. I thought that we lived in that little apartment." George interrupted, his smile broadening. "We do, sometimes. It's where we stay when we want to keep things simple. But this," he gestured to the house. "This is our family home." Margaret guided Noah into a cozy sitting room, its walls lined with bookshelves and photographs. "We wanted to get to know you before revealing everything," she said gently. "You've reminded us of something we thought we'd lost, a belief in the goodness of people. And we want to share something with you in return." George leaned forward, his tone serious yet kind. "Margaret and I built our lives around hard work, kindness, and community. Over the years, we've grown our business into something we're proud of, but now we're looking for someone to carry that forward. Someone we can trust." Noah blinked, stunned. "You're saying you want me too?" Margaret placed a hand on his. "We want to mentor you, Noah. If you're willing, we'll help you learn everything we know." Noah's world shifted in that moment, the weight of their trust both humbling and exhilarating. Noah found himself stepping into a world he could never have imagined. Margaret and George, he quickly learned, were the founders of a successful business empire that specialized in sustainable goods and ethical practices. Their company was as much about values as it was about profits, and they saw in Noah the potential to carry on their legacy. His days became a whirlwind of learning. George taught him the intricacies of running a business, finances, operations, and decision-making, while Margaret focused on the human side, emphasizing empathy and the importance of maintaining a strong moral compass in every choice. No matter how big a decision seems, Margaret told him one afternoon, always ask yourself, does this help others? If the answer is yes, you'll never go wrong. Noah's schedule was intense, but exhilarating. He attended meetings, sat in on strategy sessions, and even participated in brainstorming discussions about expanding the company's community impact. It was a steep learning curve, but he absorbed everything like a sponge, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. One day, George handed Noah a thick binder. "These are projects we've been considering but never had the bandwidth to pursue. Pick one that speaks to you." Noah pored over the options, each idea designed to improve lives, from scholarships for underprivileged students to creating environmentally friendly housing initiatives. One proposal, however, stood out, a mentorship program for young people from low-income backgrounds, providing them with resources and guidance to achieve their dreams. "This one," Noah said, holding up the proposal. "I think it could change lives." George's smile was approving. "Then it's yours to lead." The trust they placed in him was overwhelming, but it also ignited a fire within Noah. He threw himself into the project, researching, planning, and collaborating with the company's team. Along the way, he saw firsthand the impact that thoughtful leadership could have, not just on a company, but on entire communities. For the first time, Noah began to envision a future where his actions could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he had only dreamed of. He realized that Margaret and George hadn't just given him an opportunity, they had given him a calling. Over the following months, Noah fully immersed himself in his new role. He worked closely with Margaret and George, absorbing their wisdom and contributing his own fresh ideas. The mentorship program he had chosen to spearhead became a central focus of his efforts. Noah's passion for the project was contagious, inspiring the team to rally behind him. The program launched with a pilot group of 20 students, each selected for their drive and potential, but who lacked access to opportunities. Noah personally mentored some of the students, sharing his experiences and helping them navigate challenges. Seeing their growth and determination reaffirmed his belief in the power of small acts of kindness to create lasting change. Under Margaret and George's guidance, Noah also began to take on more responsibility within the company. He introduced several initiatives aimed at sustainability and community outreach, such as partnerships with local businesses and a commitment to reducing the company's carbon footprint. His ideas brought a fresh perspective to the organization, earning him respect from the board and employees alike. But it wasn't just professional growth that Noah experienced. His personal growth was equally profound. He learned to balance the demands of his new role with the relationships that mattered most. Although his breakup with Chloe had been painful, it had taught him valuable lessons about communication and empathy. Noah's relationship with his mother also deepened during this time. She was his sounding board, offering advice and encouragement when the weight of his responsibilities felt overwhelming. "Your father would be so proud of you," she often said, her eyes shining with pride. By now, Noah had grown into a confident young man with a clear sense of purpose. He was no longer the boy who had impulsively given away his birthday money. He was a leader who understood the ripple effects of every decision he made. Margaret often remarked, "It's like you were meant to find us, Noah. And we were meant to find you." But just as things seemed to settle into a rhythm, life took an unexpected turn, one that would test everything Noah had learned and challenge him in ways he couldn't yet foresee. The turning point came on a cold winter morning when Noah arrived at the office, as he had countless times before, to find an unusual hush over the usually lively building. Whispers rippled through the halls, and the usual cheerful greetings were replaced by solemn nods. Noah's chest tightened as he approached Margaret and George's private office. Inside, the company's COO, a longtime friend of the couple, met him with a somber expression. "Noah," she said gently, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but George passed away early this morning." The words hit Noah like a thunderclap. He sank into the nearest chair, his mind struggling to process the loss. George had been more than a mentor. He had been a steadying presence, a source of wisdom and encouragement. The thought of continuing without him felt unimaginable. Margaret, frail but still determined, arrived later that day. Her grief was evident, but she carried herself with the grace Noah had come to admire. She took Noah's hand in hers, her voice trembling yet resolute. "We have to keep going, Noah." That's what George would have wanted. Over the following weeks, Noah threw himself into his work, channeling his grief into action. He worked tirelessly to ensure that George's vision for the company and the mentorship program remained intact. But the loss weighed heavily on him, and he often found himself seeking solace in the quiet corners of the office where George's presence felt strongest. Just when Noah began to feel a sense of equilibrium returning, tragedy struck again. Margaret's health, already fragile, began to decline rapidly. She spent her final days at home, surrounded by the people she loved most. On a gray spring morning, Margaret passed away, leaving Noah with an overwhelming sense of loss. In the days that followed, Noah felt adrift. The two people who had seen something special in him, who had given him the tools to create change, were gone. Their absence was a void he didn't know how to fill. But as he sifted through the letters and journals they had left behind, he found their words urging him forward. Continue the work. Be the light for others, as we were for you. And Noah knew he couldn't let them down. In the wake of Margaret and George's passing, Noah found himself standing at a crossroads. The weight of their legacy pressed heavily on his shoulders, but so did the lessons they had instilled in him. He took time to grieve, leaning on his mother and the few close friends he had, but he also understood that there was work to be done. Their company and vision couldn't end with their passing. It was now his responsibility to carry it forward. Noah gathered the leadership team for a meeting, the first without George or Margaret at the helm. Despite his youth, he spoke with clarity and conviction. Margaret and George believed in all of us, in what we could achieve together. I intend to honor their legacy by continuing what they started, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. The team, many of whom had worked with the couple for decades, rallied around Noah. Their shared respect for the values that Margaret and George had embodied created a sense of unity and purpose. Together, they developed a plan to expand the company's community initiatives, including the mentorship program that had become a cornerstone of its mission. Noah also embraced the role of a public figure, something he had never imagined for himself. He spoke at schools and community events, sharing his journey and the lessons he had learned from Margaret and George. Kindness is a circle, he often said, quoting Margaret. When we give to others, we're not just helping them. We're planting seeds for a better future. Under Noah's leadership, the company thrived, but it wasn't without challenges. He faced skepticism from investors who questioned his ability to manage such a large organization at his age. He encountered setbacks with new initiatives and had to make difficult decisions that tested his resolve. Through it all, Noah kept Margaret and George's words close to his heart. He worked tirelessly to prove that success and integrity could coexist, that a business could thrive while putting people and the planet first. And slowly but surely, he began to see the ripple effects of his efforts, not just in the company's growth, but in the lives of those it touched. Noah was no longer the boy who had stumbled into a restaurant that fateful day. He was a leader, guided by the values of those who had believed in him, rising to the challenge with courage and determination. Years passed, and under Noah's leadership, the company grew into a shining example of what a business grounded in compassion and integrity could achieve. The mentorship program expanded nationwide, supporting thousands of young people in pursuing education and careers. Many of those men's returned to give back to the program, completing the circle of kindness Margaret had always envisioned. One of the company's most impactful initiatives was a partnership with local schools to provide scholarships for underprivileged students. The scholarships didn't just cover tuition, they also offered mentorship, career guidance, and access to internships. Noah made it a point to personally meet as many of the scholarship recipients as possible, sharing his own story and encouraging them to chase their dreams. But Noah's proudest achievement was the creation of the Margaret and George Foundation, a nonprofit arm of the company dedicated to advancing community projects. From building eco-friendly housing to funding healthcare clinics in underserved areas, the foundation embodied everything Margaret and George had stood for. On the 5th anniversary of Margaret and George's passing, Noah organized a tribute event to celebrate their legacy. The evening was held at the grand estate where he had first learned about their true identities. The gardens were lit with strings of fairy lights, and photos of Margaret and George adorned the walls, capturing their warmth and wisdom. As Noah addressed the crowd, he felt a swell of emotion. Margaret and George taught me that kindness isn't just an act, it's a way of life. They believed in me when I had nothing to offer, but a willingness to do the right thing. Everything we've accomplished here is because of their unwavering belief in the power of compassion. The audience, a mix of employees, men's, and community leaders, erupted into applause. Many of them had been personally touched by the initiatives Noah had spearheaded. The ripple effect of his actions had grown into a wave of change, reaching far beyond what he had ever imagined. As the night drew to a close, Noah stood beneath the stars, reflecting on how far he had come. He knew Margaret and George would be proud, not just of what he had accomplished, but of the values he had upheld in their name. As Noah continued to build upon Margaret and George's legacy, his own life began to take shape in ways he hadn't expected. Amid the busy days of managing the company and foundation, he met Elise, a passionate community organizer who shared his vision for making a difference. Their first encounter was during a collaborative project to build a community center in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. Elise was a whirlwind of energy and ideas, and Noah was immediately drawn to her authenticity and drive. She didn't just talk about change, she made it happen. Over coffee breaks and late-night planning sessions, their professional partnership blossomed into something more personal. Elise had a way of challenging Noah, encouraging him to see things from new perspectives, while also grounding him when the weight of his responsibilities became too much. "You're carrying a lot on your shoulders," she said one evening as they sat on the steps of the community center they had just opened. "But you don't have to do it alone." Noah smiled, appreciating her insight. "Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to fill shoes too big for me." Margaret and George, they set such a high bar. Elise placed a reassuring hand on his. "You're not filling their shoes, Noah. You're walking your own path, inspired by them. And from what I can see, you're doing an incredible job." Their relationship grew steadily, rooted in mutual respect and a shared commitment to service. Elise became not just a partner in Noah's personal life, but a collaborator in his mission to create meaningful change. Together, they developed new programs through the Margaret and George Foundation, expanding its reach to include environmental sustainability initiatives and mental health resources for underserved communities. A year later, Noah proposed to Elise in a quiet moment at the park where they had first shared their dreams. Their wedding was a celebration of love and purpose, attended by the people whose lives they had touched through their work. With Elise by his side, Noah felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. Together, they were building not just a life, but a legacy of kindness and service that would continue to grow and inspire for generations to come. A decade after Margaret and George had taken Noah under their wing, he stood on the stage of a grand hall, addressing a crowd that had gathered to celebrate their memory. The event was the culmination of everything their legacy represented, a gala that showcased the impact of their company, foundation, and mentorship programs. The hall was adorned with photos capturing Margaret and George's journey, from their humble beginnings to the empire they had built. Testimonials from people whose lives had been changed played on screens, telling stories of scholarships, mentorship, and second chances. The atmosphere was electric with gratitude and inspiration. Noah, now a confident and composed young man, looked out at the audience. He saw familiar faces, former men's employees, community leaders, and friends who had been part of the journey. His mother sat in the front row, her eyes shining with pride, and beside her was Elise, holding their young daughter in her lap. As Noah began to speak, his voice carried both strength and emotion. "Margaret and George were more than mentors to me. They were my family. They saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself, and they gave me the tools to create a life I never thought possible." He paused, scanning the room, letting the weight of his words settle. "They taught me that kindness isn't a weakness. It's the most powerful force we have. It's what binds us together, what inspires us to keep going even when the road is hard." Noah shared anecdotes from his time with Margaret and George, stories that made the audience laugh and tear up. He spoke about their unwavering belief in the potential of others, their courage to take risks for what was right, and their deep commitment to leaving the world better than they found it. In their honor, Noah concluded, "I pledge to continue their work, to uphold the values they lived by, and to ensure that their legacy of kindness and compassion touches as many lives as possible." The audience rose to their feet in applause, a thunderous ovation that echoed through the hall. As Noah stepped off the stage, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Margaret and George's legacy was alive, thriving, and inspiring countless others to believe in the power of kindness. As the gala wound down, Noah took one last opportunity to address the audience. This time, his tone was more personal, almost as if he were speaking directly to each individual in the room. "There's something Margaret told me during one of our many conversations," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "She said, 'Kindness is a circle, it always comes back.'" I didn't fully understand the weight of those words back then, but now, after everything, I see how true they are. He gestured toward the screen behind him, which displayed photos and videos of projects funded by the Margaret and George Foundation. From smiling students in graduation caps to families moving into eco-friendly homes, the images told a story of transformation and hope. All of this, Noah continued, started with one act of kindness. One decision to stand up for what's right. It wasn't planned or calculated. It was simply a moment of choosing to care. And from that moment, a ripple began. Noah paused, letting the silence settle over the room. Every one of us has the power to create ripples. You don't need wealth or status to make a difference. You just need a willingness to see others, to understand their struggles, and to ask yourself, how can I help? He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his eyes scanning the audience. The truth is, we all have a role to play in shaping the world we want to live in. Margaret and George believed in that, and I believe in it, too. If you take one thing away from tonight, let it be this: your kindness matters. Your actions, no matter how small, can change lives in ways you can't even imagine. The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. Noah smiled, his voice softening. So, go out there and be the start of your own circle. You'll be amazed at how far it can go. The audience erupted into applause, and as Noah stepped back, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had done his part to carry forward the values that Margaret and George had instilled in him, and now it was up to others to continue the circle. After the gala, Noah took a quiet moment to reflect backstage. The evening had been a resounding success, but more importantly, it had reminded him of the profound impact that Margaret and George had made, not just on his life, but on countless others. The stories shared that night weren't just about projects or initiatives. They were about hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of human connection. As he walked back into the hall, he was approached by a young man who looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Bennett," he began, his voice hesitant. "I just wanted to thank you. I was one of the first recipients of the mentorship program, and I wouldn't be where I am today without it. I'm about to graduate from college, and I've already been accepted into a nonprofit leadership program." Noah's face lit up with pride. "That's incredible. I'm so proud of you. What's next for you?" The young man smiled, his confidence growing. "I want to start an organization to help foster kids transition into adulthood. They don't always have the support they need, and I think I can make a difference." Noah clasped his shoulder. "That's exactly what this is all about. Margaret and George believed in me, and now you're paying it forward. Keep going, you're going to change lives." As the young man walked away, Noah felt a familiar warmth in his chest. It was the same feeling he had experienced the day he stood up for Margaret and George at the restaurant. That single moment of kindness had created ripples he could never have predicted, and now, those ripples were becoming waves. Later that night, Noah sat with Elise, recounting the evening's highlights. She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "You know, you're living proof that one act of kindness can change the world." Noah thought for a moment, then replied, "I'm just continuing what Margaret and George started. They showed me what's possible when you believe in people, and now, it's my turn to show others." The next day, as the stories from the gala spread online, Noah's message reached thousands more. His words, simple yet profound, inspired people around the world to consider how their actions, big or small, could create a lasting impact. As the gala stories and highlights continued to gain attention online, Noah took the opportunity to share a final message with a broader audience. He recorded a heartfelt video that would serve as both a reflection on his journey and a rallying cry for others to take action in their own lives. Seated in a simple room adorned with photos of Margaret, George, and the projects they had inspired, Noah spoke directly to the camera. His tone was warm and genuine, his words chosen carefully, but flowing naturally. "Hi everyone, it's Noah Bennett," he began. "I want to share something that's been on my mind since last night's gala. You've probably seen the stories by now. the incredible impact Margaret and George had, and the lives they touched through their kindness. But I want to remind you of something important. Their legacy didn't start with grand gestures or massive initiatives. It started with small acts of care and compassion. He paused, leaning slightly forward. You see, years ago, I made a simple choice. I stood up for two strangers who were being treated unfairly, not knowing who they were or where it would lead. That one decision changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. And it taught me something that I carry with me every day: the power of one moment, one choice, one act of kindness. Noah's eyes glimmered with sincerity as he continued. I'm sharing this because I believe we all have that power. You don't have to be a millionaire or a CEO to make a difference. You just have to care. Whether it's helping a neighbor, supporting a friend, or standing up for someone who needs it, your actions matter. He ended with a call to action, his voice steady and full of hope. So, I'm asking you, what will your act of kindness be? How will you start your own circle? Share your stories, inspire others, and let's create a world where compassion isn't the exception, it's the rule. The video concluded with an invitation to join the Margaret and George Foundation in their mission to spread kindness. The final message on screen read, "Together, we can change the world, one act of kindness at a time." As the video went live, it quickly went viral, sparking a wave of stories and initiatives around the globe. Noah's message had become more than words, it was a movement.